The old man had been sitting in the restaurant for nearly an hour, staring at a plate of food he could no longer afford, while the woman beside him quietly wiped tears from her eyes. Around them, people laughed, waiters hurried past, and one cruel customer whispered that the elderly couple should have stayed home if they could not pay. But one waitress stopped everything. She walked over, placed her hand gently on the old woman's shoulder, and did something that would soon change her entire life. She had no idea that the two people everyone was mocking were waiting for the most important person in their lives, and that their son was worth more money than anyone in that restaurant could imagine. Before we begin, if you believe kindness still matters, if you believe people deserve second chances, and if you believe one small act of compassion can change someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us bring more stories of kindness, courage, and humanity to people around the world. The restaurant stood on one of the busiest streets in the city, surrounded by office towers, expensive stores, and endless traffic. It was the kind of place where businessmen came for lunch, couples celebrated anniversaries, and wealthy families sometimes arrived in cars that cost more than most people earned in a year. Behind the polished glass windows, everything was designed to look perfect. The silverware was always shining, the tables were always clean, and the staff were expected to move quickly without making mistakes. But beneath that polished surface, every employee carried a private story. And no one carried a heavier one than 27-year-old Emily, a waitress who had learned to smile even when life gave her every reason to cry. Emily had been working at the restaurant for almost 3 years. She was not there because she dreamed of carrying plates and cleaning tables. She was there because life had left her with very few choices. Her mother had passed away several years earlier, and Emily was responsible for helping her younger brother finish school. Every month, she calculated her tips carefully, knowing that one unexpected expense could destroy the fragile balance she had built. She rented a tiny apartment, took 2 buses to work, and often skipped meals so she could send a little extra money home. Still, she rarely complained. She believed that being poor was difficult, but being cruel was a choice. That rainy afternoon began like any other. The lunch crowd had filled almost every table, and Emily had been moving nonstop for hours. Her shoes hurt, her back ached, and she had barely taken a sip of water. Then the restaurant doors opened, and an elderly couple slowly stepped inside. The man appeared to be in his late 70s, tall but slightly bent with age, wearing an old gray coat that had clearly seen better days. His wife was perhaps a few years younger, dressed in a simple blue cardigan, with silver hair carefully pinned behind her ears. They stood near the entrance for several seconds, looking uncertainly around the busy restaurant. Several customers glanced at them, and then looked away. One waiter approached them but quickly returned to the kitchen after noticing their worn clothing. Emily noticed immediately. She walked toward them with a warm smile and guided them to a quiet table near the window. The old woman thanked her repeatedly, almost apologizing for taking up space. Emily assured them that they were welcome and brought them menus. The couple studied the menu for a long time. Emily could see their hesitation. They whispered to each other, pointing at the prices and then lowering their eyes. Finally, they ordered 1 bowl of soup, 1 small portion of bread, and a cup of tea. Emily understood immediately. They were sharing a meal because they could not afford to. Instead of judging them, she quietly went back to the kitchen and asked the chef to prepare 2 bowls of soup. She added extra bread and divided the main dish into 2 plates. She knew the manager might complain, but she did not care. When she returned, she placed the food in front of them and smiled as though everything were perfectly normal. The elderly woman looked surprised. The old man tried to protest, but Emily gently told them that the kitchen had prepared an extra portion by mistake. They knew she was lying, but they accepted the food. For the first time that afternoon, both of them smiled. Unfortunately, Not everyone found the moment touching. At a nearby table sat a group of wealthy young customers dressed in expensive clothes. They had been drinking, laughing loudly, and treating the restaurant staff as though they were invisible. One of them noticed Emily giving the couple extra food. He leaned toward his friends and made a sarcastic remark about the restaurant becoming a charity center. His friends laughed. Emily heard them. She pretended not to. Then one of the men deliberately raised his voice and suggested that if the restaurant wanted to feed people for free, it should stop charging customers who actually had money. A few people laughed. Emily felt her face grow hot. She had heard insults before, but that day something about their laughter hurt more than usual. Perhaps it was because the old woman had heard it too. Emily looked toward the elderly couple and saw the woman staring down at her soup, tears gathering in her eyes. That was when Emily decided she would not let them feel ashamed. She walked over, placed another piece of bread on their table, and quietly told them that they were her guests. The old man looked at her with gratitude that seemed far greater than the value of a meal. But the wealthy customer was not finished. He called Emily over and complained loudly that she was wasting the restaurant's food on people who could not afford it. He demanded that she remove the extra plate. The manager, who had been watching from behind the counter, rushed over. Emily expected him to defend her. Instead, he apologized to the customer. Then he turned toward Emily with a stern expression. He told her that she needed to stop giving away food without permission. Emily swallowed her embarrassment and nodded. But when she returned to the elderly couple, she quietly told them not to worry about the bill. She would pay it herself. The old woman immediately shook her head. Emily smiled and told her that sometimes people simply needed someone to believe they were worth helping. The elderly woman reached across the table and held Emily's hand. That simple gesture stayed with Emily. The couple finished their meal slowly. They seemed reluctant to leave, almost as if they were waiting for something. Every few minutes, the old man looked toward the restaurant entrance. Emily wondered whether someone was coming to pick them up. Eventually, the elderly woman asked Emily if she could stay with them for a few minutes. Emily had other tables waiting. Her manager was watching. But she stayed. The old woman began telling her about her husband. He had worked most of his life repairing machines in a small factory. They had raised one son. They had never been wealthy, but they had always been proud of their family. Then she mentioned that their son had become successful. Very successful. He had built a technology company and traveled constantly for work. The old woman smiled when she spoke about him, but there was sadness behind her smile. Emily asked why he was not with them. The old man looked toward the rain outside. Their son, they explained, was always busy. He sent money, arranged expensive cars, and made sure they had everything they needed. But lately, they had begun to feel that money was replacing his presence. They did not want another expensive gift. They wanted their son to sit with them. That was why they had come to the restaurant. They had asked him to meet them there. Emily suddenly understood why the old man had been checking the door. He was waiting for his son. Minutes passed. Then the restaurant doors opened. A tall man in a dark suit walked inside. The room seemed to change instantly. The manager recognized him first. The color drained from his face. The wealthy customers stopped laughing. The waiters froze. The man who had just entered was not simply another customer. He was one of the city's most successful businessmen, a self-made millionaire whose company employed hundreds of people. His face appeared regularly in business magazines. His name was known throughout the city. And he was walking directly toward the elderly couple. Emily watched as the man stopped beside their table. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the old woman reached up and touched her son's face. The millionaire knelt beside her. And instead of greeting her with a formal handshake or asking about the bill, he wrapped his arms around his mother and held her tightly. The entire restaurant became silent. Emily suddenly realized who she had been serving. The elderly couple were his parents. The millionaire looked at the table and saw the 2 bowls of soup, the extra bread, and the modest meal. Then he noticed Emily. His eyes moved from his parents to the food and then to the manager. He asked what had happened. No one answered. The manager tried to explain that there had been a misunderstanding, that Emily had given the couple extra food without permission, and that the restaurant normally did not tolerate such behavior. But before he could finish, the old woman interrupted. She told her son exactly what had happened. She told him how Emily had welcomed them when others ignored them. She told him how Emily had noticed they were sharing a meal and secretly gave them more food. She told him how customers had mocked them, and how Emily had stayed beside them despite the pressure. Then she told him the most important part. Emily had paid for their meal herself. The millionaire looked at Emily. For several seconds he said nothing. Emily expected anger. She thought perhaps he would complain that she had embarrassed his parents by treating them as poor. Instead, his expression softened. He thanked her. Emily told him it was nothing. But he shook his head. He said that it was not nothing. He explained that he had spent years believing that taking care of his parents meant sending them money, buying them a better house, hiring people to help them, and making sure they never needed anything. But that day, he realized something painful. His parents did not need another expensive gift. They needed someone to notice them. Someone to sit beside them. Someone to make them feel human instead of invisible. And Emily had given them that without knowing who they were. The millionaire then turned toward the manager. The same manager who had scolded Emily moments earlier suddenly became nervous. The millionaire asked how